Hello everybody, and welcome to Constellation of the Month. I'm John Axtell from Guildford Astronomical Society and of course the Stars Over Surrey programme on Brooklands Radio. So welcome to the constellation for September. Let's go over to my slides and I'll tell you a little bit about this wonderful constellation. So here we are over at the laptop looking at a few slides now about our constellation of the month for September. And as per usual, I'd just like to give astronomers out there a chance to see if they can match the star pattern that's shown there to identify the constellation. And it is, of course, Cygnus. Cygnus the Swan. Now, using my old Out into Space PG Tips cards. That was 1956, Dave, when I was a little lad. So I collected all these, still got them, and that shows Cygnus the Swan and something about Cygnus the Swan there. One interesting point, it says, one named 61 Cygni, a small variable star in this constellation and almost invisible to the naked eye, was the first to have its distance from the Earth determined. 50 billion miles. That's using a technique called parallax. Okay, so the mythology. There's quite a few different accounts about Cygnus. However, here's one popular one. Zeus, the king of the gods, desired a lady called Leda, very beautiful wife, but she was married to the king of Sparta. So he knew he had to do some kind of subterfuge. He knew that she wouldn't love him for what he was, a magnificent god. So he disguised himself as a swan, and he was successful. Dressing up as a swan, he courted her successfully. I think she was a bit of a strange lady, personally. So there you go. They had several children, according to the legend. Castor, whose twin, of course, was Pollux. So Castor was immortal, Pollux was mortal, because his father was her husband, the Spartan king. And those, of course, are the Gemini, the constellation, because they were put in the sky to keep them together by the gods. Helen of Troy was one of their children, apparently, as also was Clytemnestra, wife of Agamemnon. So, the constellation itself. Main star, Deneb, a first magnitude star, and one of those three corners of Patrick Moore's summer triangle. The other stars are second or third magnitude. Two Messier objects can be found within Cygnus itself. Both of them are open clusters, M29 and M39, both visible through small telescopes or good powered binoculars. There's another really interesting deep sky object called the Dumbbell, a nebula, close to Cygnus, but actually just over the border in the constellation of Vulpecula. But I thought I'd include it as it's close enough. The second star, Beta Cygni, known as Albireo, is a beautiful double star, and I'm sure people would like to turn their optical instruments onto that to see what I mean. But there are others that can also be found within the constellation. So where to find it in the night sky? So we're looking due south about mid-September, 10 o'clock. Find that summer triangle that we've talked about before, the three stars, Vega, Altair and Deneb. And Deneb is the main star of the Swan, the constellation Cygnus, sometimes known as the Northern Cross, as can be seen. So there's another picture of it with some of the objects already shown, the interesting objects. So the Messier objects, whoops, that's M29. I noticed a typo there, my apologies. M29 and M39, both open clusters, and M27, the planetary nebula of the Dumbbell. Okay. Then the double star is Albireo, and another double star, Gamma, there in the constellation, and a triple star, the Omicron, down here. And And other objects of interest, there's one here called the North American Nebula, NGC 7000, and the Veil Nebula over here, the remnants of a supernova explosion. I'll show you pictures of those in just a moment. So Albireo, where to find it? Well, there's another view of the summer triangle and the constellation of Cygnus, and Albireo, you can see, is the beak of the swan. In fact, in Arab astronomy, it was known as the beak of the hen. They called it a hen rather than a swan. But that's what it looks like. You've got an orange-yellow primary star and a really attractive blue companion. Quite close, but it is resolvable by small telescopes and good binoculars, and does make a lovely sight. So 400 light years away, the primary star, the yellow one, is 3rd magnitude, and the companion is 5th magnitude. So here we are, M29, the cluster. You can see it was one that was actually discovered by Charles Messier. Although he listed all these objects and they bear his name, he didn't actually discover all of them. He also recorded some recorded by his fellow astronomers. So 4,400 light years away. A lot closer is M39, distance of 950 light years. And this one was discovered by Guillaume Le Gentil. But here's the Planetary nebula called the Dumbbell, 815 light years away. But again, a Charles Messier discovery. This is where a star has died. All that's left is a tiny white dwarf as all that's left of the progenitor star, and it's in its death throes as a main sequence star. It's thrown off all of its outer layers, which have expanded, giving this shape. So some people call it, let me just go back a little bit if I may, some people call it not just the dumbbell but the apple core, and you can see that maybe as an apple core. Back to this one, which you just caught a glimpse of. This is the North American Nebula, and I think you can see why it's got its shape. There's the Gulf of Mexico coming up there. Here's the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps there's Florida, and there's the rest of the North American continent. But alongside that is another nebula. I wonder if you can think what this one might be called. There you are, a long beak, an eye, bit of a shape there, a bird perhaps. It's known as the Pelican Nebula. We have to call them something. It's a bit boring just to call it IC 5070, so the Pelican Nebula. And here is the Veil. Again, the remnants of a massive stellar explosion, a supernova, and that's one of my favourite objects in the night sky. It's huge. I can never see the whole of that in just one eyepiece. It's a massive object. But spread across the sky, but extremely faint. And of course, you won't see it like this through telescopes. You'll need special filters. I use one called an oxygen 3 filter to bring out the faint traceries of the different gases. And exposures like this have been built up through many different layers, many different images over a long time, and the colours brought out by software. But worth having a look for if you've got the appropriate telescopic kit. Now here's an object that I think people, even with small binoculars, ought to have a go at. I've just shown you this asterism, as it's called. I'm not going to tell you what it's called. Have a look at it, see if you can think what it might be called. But now I'll show you, if I show it to you the right way up, perhaps you'll see now why it's called the coat hanger. So you've got a row of stars along here, and then a hook of stars above it. Perfect coat hanger. And the place to find it, if you found your way to Albireo, just a little bit further down, that's where the coat hanger is to be found. You'll see this rift in the Milky Way where there are dust clouds masking the star fields behind. So an interesting object, an asterism, a group of stars that make a shape that aren't called a constellation. If I turn it up the other way again, the way we normally would see it in the night sky, you'll see why it's also called the ski lift by some people. There's the wire, there's the ski lift underneath, and also it has a more formal name of Brocchi's cluster. Brocchi, an astronomer who identified it. It also has a boring name in a catalogue called Colander 399. Now, just to show you the star fields that the constellation is against, a friend of mine, John Evans, from Guildford Astronomical Society, an expert astrophotographer, has taken this image of the star fields across that area that contains the constellation Cygnus. And here you can see the Milky Way behind Cygnus. Here you can see this rift. It's called the Cygnus Rift, which is the dust clouds masking the faint light from stars beyond. Up here you can see the North American nebula, and over here you can see the Pelican. But because of the number of stars there, it's actually very difficult to make out Cygnus itself. So I've just put on a few lines just to show you where they are. If that works. No, it didn't. Okay, not to worry. But so there we are. Let's finish with the constellation of Cygnus and a reminder of the objects within it. The North American, the Veil, M39, M29, and just off the screen here is where you would find the Dumbbell Nebula. So that's it, my constellation of the month, Cygnus.